Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Today we have Ash from Microsoft. He's a master trainer for Microsoft, and we have Daniel Morris there from Lenovo. He's the lead for the Azure HCI stack. So the topic for today's discussion, obviously, we want to address the risk and maintaining support of the Windows Server 2022 and how we can work with Lenovo to achieve that moving forward. Without further ado, I'll hand off to Ash to start his part. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thanks Simon, and hi Dan. It's great to have everyone here. I think this is probably it's probably going to feel like this for a little while now, where the conversations we're having are very relevant because of something happening in the media, in the public, and no doubt probably a lot of us affected by this as well. But before we get into start talking about the Server 2022, and even touching on Azure Stack HCI. With Dan and some of their hardware, want to flag with you the end of support that is coming for Windows Server 2012. Of course, just like what we've been talking about with you previously, with Server 2008, Server 2012, of course, is coming towards the end of its support. So that date is October 10, 2023. And so now is a perfect time, now that we're 12 months out, to start having those conversations with customers, or to start finding out where those customers are. Sometimes it's not necessarily we know exactly where these systems are, but it's important that we start to have those conversations around it. And so if you're not familiar, what does end of support actually mean? So particularly for SMBs, this means that there are no longer any new security updates or even non-security updates. So no new features, no security patches, nothing, no assisted support options or any other technical content that will come out for it. So essentially the product is reaching its end of life, and whilst it will still work, none of that support is actually going to be there to help customers past this date. And so what does it mean to you as a reseller engaging with customers? And so obviously, like I said, it's a great opportunity to engage with customers, start talking about refreshing the hardware that they're running their 2012 or even 2008 servers on. Quite a few things have changed, and Dan will touch on some of the things of what newer hardware can obviously do, but in general, we're talking from a reliability point of view, or cooling and energy efficiency, performance per watt, all of that has drastically changed over the time. And so there's some great advantages for SMBs to gain out of actually taking advantage of refreshing their hardware. But of course, enabling new capabilities for customers as well. So you can help customize, modernize their business as well. If we look at something like Server 2022. So of course, if we think about growing demand and we talk about modern technology within SMBs, we know that SMBs, particularly with COVID, they're on a path to digital transformation. So whether it's from deploying devices or even deploying flexible infrastructure, both from the server side to the endpoint side, and also in integrating those capabilities, they're wanting to change how they're doing that business. COVID has kind of forced a lot of people to do that, to start thinking about that. And so now it's really, and as you can see here, it's the time to upgrade from legacy. Even if we look at Server 2008, an alarming amount of organizations don't have a migration plan in place for Server 2008, and they're going to be forced to upgrade or to make some sudden and quick decisions on how to migrate or how to move on to a better system because of a security incident or compliance issue. And compliance issue can be that they're holding onto financial data, personal ID info, or any other kind of sensitive information where if they're not utilizing, they can actually fall out of compliance for the regulator, or the rules are in place to protect their information if they're not hosting it on a secured server. Of course, we're seeing a lot more SMBs embracing the cloud as well, and they might not be ready to be all in just now. They're not ready to throw everything away and go, look, we're going to go 100% all in on the cloud, but they're starting to build momentum. They're starting to get there and to think about it. So whilst there definitely customers out there and SMBs that are still prefer to have the server in the rack or in the office to have their data there, but they're also starting to think about, well, how can we leverage services like Azure to do, whether it's from backups to extending some capability for remote work, or even some app capabilities through there. So there's particularly Server 22, there is that capability there for allow SMBs to start building that momentum and start looking at it through there. We think about modernizing. If in that context of what I've just said, we want to think about, well, how can we modernize with a cloud-ready operating system? And so this is where Server 2022 comes in. So we can help customers take advantage of the cloud capabilities at their own pace, but also they can still stick to what they know and what they're comfortable with, and so it doesn't completely disrupt their processes of how they do things by having that on-prem, but with the possibility to explore that at their own pace, at their own scale as well. I think about server's been around for a little while now. We've gone through a lot of different iterations, and even if you think about where we are right now, of what we're talking about end of support, we're talking about end of support 2012. We still have a lot of customers too on Server 2008, and so you kind of think about those two together. The low-hanging fruit in general is actually quite significant with it, but it also shows in context of, we've moved on a bit from those two operating systems, and we've seen a lot of different innovations throughout the entire sort of history of Windows Server. So what does Server 22 bring in? And I've got a slide that just summarizes this at a little bit closer to the end if you really want to get into some specifics, which is, I know that some don't need that, some just want the general gist, and others really want to know some pure specifics. But in general, we're looking at those hybrid capabilities with Azure. We're looking at multi-layer security, and this security is actually coming from the PC side of the business. So secured core server, shipped to the cloud, ensuring that we've got the hardware protections built in place, as well as the operating system security, and obviously the cloud capability over the top. So adding that advanced multi-layer, which is important for small businesses that are having devices on-prem, which have a slightly different risk profile compared to a device that might sit in a data center. So it's definitely has higher foot traffic and proximity to something nefarious being quite different. Of course, secure remote working is important. Even like myself, I'm based out of Brisbane, but I'm in Melbourne at the moment for another event, and so I need those capabilities as much as somebody working from home to have those remote working options and in that support. So we're offering greater levels of encryption, greater levels of ways that we can have secure connections through that. And of course, through Modernize server infrastructure. So how can we utilize things about software-defined storage and networking? How can we minimize the number of boxes that are needed by leveraging these new hardware innovations that we really kind of have had and have seen to allow that to scale and to scope as well as that customer grows. So we're talking about things like Azure, and we start to bring it in. Obviously, for you as a partner, you can drive cloud capabilities through that. You can allow and to start to think about how can they manage. So even if they have a couple other services, or they might have Azure and they've played around with it, they can use different pieces of that and to help manage this server as well through the one management platform as well. So you can use it through Azure Arc as well. You can monitor your infrastructure, your network through Azure Monitor. There's a whole heap of different ways, as well as probably what is most important for SMBs is the backup and disaster recovery. We all probably should hopefully know the 3-2-1 rule, and it's no different when it comes to backing up your server as well. So having those different means of leveraging Azure for your backup and disaster recovery is a great option, even if they don't use anything else. It's a great way for customers to start leaning on and start experiencing what that integration can do. Of course, multi-layer security, like what I've said, secured core is the first time we've had this built into our servers. We haven't done this before on server. We've done it on PCs previously. So whether it's inspection, theft, and tampering, so knowing if someone's opened the device and trusting that when it's been shipped from Lenovo, for example, you know that when it arrives to the customer, nothing nefarious has happened in that third-party transaction. Just as an example of where this can come in handy, as well as, you know, if it's sitting in a rack, knowing that somebody hasn't found an open rack and decided to take a peek inside. Of course, as I said before, these tools that come in around the more secure networking, I'll touch on this a little bit deeper when we go through our list of features. But this is something that customers are using day in and day out. And this is where we want to have not only just greater levels of security, but how can we make it more seamless to access remote desktops and apps? So we're leveraging the security tools that we have, as well as being able to be a little bit smarter of how we're managing performance across those servers in virtual machines as well. So we can better leverage the hardware and do more with less, essentially, with it as well. And of course, with modernizing that server infrastructure, if you think about devices and servers that we have from 2008 all the way through to 2012, and even to today, quite a lot has changed. And so we've moved a lot more to software-defined solutions, as well as having those containerized platforms, so you can have secure, simple, and different types of apps, just a little bit smarter in how they operate and how they work. Of course, with it being around performance, efficiency as well, seeing the levels of performance out of a similar box to today compared to 2012 being quite significant. And so less air conditioning, or you can do more with the same level of air conditioning, greater reliability in hardware. There's a huge list of stuff, and Dan will touch on that. But this is here to provide a bit of a greater snapshot of what's new in Server 2022. So we want to touch on security. So hardware root of trust. So this is where it is checking that the BIOS hasn't been tampered with. It's making sure that the encryption keys that are stored there are protected. We have firmware protection to make sure that it's checking that it hasn't been modified. And so if it notices it does, it won't go any further. Of course, we have virtualization-based security. So these are all philosophies that we've taken from our Windows 10 and Windows 11 PC operating systems, and have seen great success with those and implemented that into Server 22. Of course, Azure Arc, it's enabled into this, so you can have that greater overarching management and control. You don't have to dive into different management or monitoring tools to see the health of this compared to any other cloud systems that you might be using. Of course, we've made improvements in Admin Center, and if you're going one step further, we also have that Azure Auto Manage with hot patching in there that can be leveraged as well. In terms of secure connectivity, we've got a list here that kind of shows the step forward in the improvements that we've made. So whether it's HTTPS and TLS 1.3, it's enabled by default. It's not just there, but it's enabled by default. DNS over HTTPS, this is important There's plenty of examples of that, and we're seeing that even come in by default for a number of different consumer browsers now, having that to protect those requests that are going through. Of course, greater SMB 256 encryption, east-west SMB encryption controls, SMB over QUIC as well. When it comes to storage, we want to help with that storage migration as well. We know that moving data is not fun. So we've improved and made that storage migration service better. Adjustable storage repair speed as well, so you can prioritize different aspects of, depending on what the needs are of the client and what the end user has on that. You can use storage bus cache with storage spaces, and of course, compression enhancements with SMB. We've also found that we can have, and we can leverage as well, nested virtualization for empty processes for the first time, UDP, TCP, Hyper-V, virtual switch improvements. So it's a nice step forwards in terms of your overall performance capabilities. So when you're talking to customers, you've got to think about, well, how can we help them? Like, what is the key points when we're talking to them to help address what they're looking for? So if you're selling a Windows Server box to them, and they're conscious of wanting to get the most out of that, you can help them maximize that investment by extending the capability into the data center to Azure as well. So whether it's through the backup systems or the app capabilities, offloading. So as they grow, or as they have peaks of demand, they can leverage Azure that's there. So they don't have to keep purchasing different boxes for something that's temporary or over purchase, or they can maximize that investment they have available to them, and manage that as they grow as well. And that's particularly at the moment, that's quite important. Of course, security. It's the last few days alone, there's been a massive focus on security, and obviously how to handle that as well from the other side of things, but around how do you maintain that security, and how do you keep it secure or keep critical data safe. And so this is what Server is delivering with that as well, and particularly with modern hardware, that goes a long way. Of course, we want to enable and empower remote workers through that, streamlined server management as well. Some customers aren't just going to have the one little solution. They are leveraging different cloud or on-prem as well, and so they can streamline that. And of course, around leading back to that, embrace server monetization for that better performance and better innovation that's available through it. But that's it from me. If you do have any questions, I know that through this platform we have a bit of a limitation, but we can send them through to Simon, or we'll find a way to get them through to me, and we can talk about that. But until then, I think I'll pass it to Dan now.
Fantastic. Thank you, mate. So I've been sitting there for half an hour, not talking. Let's see if I can share my screen. Hopefully it's going to work. Nope, didn't work. Oh no. I'm clicking too many times. Sorry about this. Got a problem here, Ash. Not letting me change over. Well, while I awkwardly click and try and work out how to do this, I'm Daniel Morris, everyone. I look after the HCI portfolio at Lenovo for Australia and New Zealand. There we go. Thank you, Ash. Did you do that for me? Cheers, mate. There we go. Should be able to see my screen now. Yeah, so the way that we thought we'd go through today, we've been talking with Simon and the team at Leader, and HCI is becoming, well, has been a talking point in the market for a number of years. It's been around pretty much for the last 10 or 11 years, and it hasn't existed in the context of Microsoft. But what's really changing now is what Ash was talking about, this Windows 2019, Windows 2022, and this push into what we call hybrid cloud, or bringing Azure services to the edge. And so I've got a couple of slides here, but the key things really, if you've got a customer that's looking, that's got issues with, they're running older versions of Windows and not sure how to upgrade, if they've got workloads where they think they might want to actually have some hybrid cloud workloads, then reach out to the leader team. If they're looking even just to modernize, they've got a couple of servers and a SAN, and they're looking to simplify that stack, they might be looking at single node, 2-node configurations, edge, IoT. I'm not sure if anyone on the call went to some of the leader expos been doing, right? But most of the vendors there are camera vendors, edge networking, so much edge, and that's what this is around. So if you've got any more questions from here, please reach out to Simon. I run a community called MXpert. It's around Microsoft and hybrid, right? Especially Azure Stack HCI. There's a lot to learn. So I'll just have decks. We do some enablement. There's some specialists in there that can give you some help. So yeah, if you get anything from this thing, really ask for help, and we've got information if you want to get it. Okay. Now, in terms of Lenovo, we have a few guys in the team that specialize in Microsoft. Myself, Nick Tesler, and Rajiv or Raj. Raj runs our CSP as well as our Azure practice. And Nick actually lives up here in Brisbane with me. So between all of us, Ash and I both live in Queensland. That's why we're nice and comfy and it's nice and warm up here. But then we've also got Kirthi in the bottom left there. She works for Microsoft, but she is the Azure Stack HCI specialist nationally for Microsoft. So she's going around doing a lot of education as well. If you want to, you can screenshot that QR code quickly, and that will take you to a link to join that MXpert group. So anyway, we talk about Windows Server and some of the benefits. The big thing is the security piece, and there's multiple layers to it. Probably a lot of you are aware of like ransomware and those sorts of threats, but like what Ash talked about with some of the new benefits coming into Windows Server 2022, like Secure Core, better integration into Active Directory. There's features inside of Azure like Sentinel and Defender. There's all these different layers of security, but if you don't look at the base hardware from a security perspective, like all of our hardware now assumes that you've got a base level of BIOS in there, so that the Microsoft will let you install the software, right? So we can't put Windows Server 2022 on some of the older generation hardware because it compromises that security stack. But where people are talking to us a lot, I had a lot of conversations in Brisbane at the leader event around, you see here, this hybrid multi-cloud. You're going to hear Microsoft talk a lot about Azure Stack HCI, a thing called Azure Arc, which is their way of bringing Azure services into Windows Server, and also Azure Stack HCI, and also another thing called AKS, which maybe that may not be as relevant for here today, but as containerization and Kubernetes and those sorts of things become more and more common, this is a platform where it just runs by default, right? You don't necessarily need to have the skills to admin it. You can just consume it. And the same thing for SQL, same thing for Azure Virtual Desktop. There's a whole bunch of different Azure services that Microsoft are looking to, I guess, bring simplification and automation into this platform. And that's what Azure Stack HCI unlocks. Now, from a Lenovo perspective, you can see all the key bits in here. So the client to edge to core to cloud is what we talk about. We also, Lenovo owns Motorola, just for a bit of fact. So sometimes they go from the pocket to the client to the edge to core to cloud. But the idea of it is now is edge is popping up more and more and more, where that is where either you're consuming a technology or you're interfacing with the consumer, right? So the example we use quite a lot is in manufacturing and retail. You know, you're scanning your groceries at Woolies. There's a whole lot of smarts that happen there. There's more and more work being done around, digital twins and Omniverse with NVIDIA. There's been work being done with drones and videos and higher generation cameras where the data being generated cannot be pumped to the cloud, especially with Australia being so big, right? As you know, 5G is not going to cut it. We don't have the performance, so sometimes we need to deal with the data at the source. And so being able to natively go from your laptop here into wherever you're working back into the cloud is going to be critical, and you don't want to be managing multiple interfaces and multiple ways of dealing with this. Now, just for, I think probably most people should know what HCI is, but if you don't, it's just a simplification of the stack that always used to run in people's environments. They used to have 2 servers and some storage. They might be direct connected, or there might be some fabric in between. In the bigger environments, obviously we have a lot more servers and a lot more storage, but it still was the same thing over and over. And VMware is typically the base for that. Since then, we've got VMware, there's Hyper-V, there's KVM which is an open source hypervisor. The hypervisor has become sort of a bit of a commodity now. And so with these systems here, we've taken a server with some storage, compute, memory, and networking, right? And then the software on top, and that's where HCI has come from. So it's called hyper-converged infrastructure, or HCI, right? So hypervisor, and then converged storage and compute. And so we're able to simplify a stack like this here on the left and turn it into a couple of servers and maybe some top-of-rack switching. Now, I've got another slide down the track. With the edge ones, we can get away with not even needing that top-of-rack switching. So it's just about simplifying that stack. It's still the same workloads, and unfortunately, as Ash talked about, a lot of them still Windows 2008, 2012. I've got a slide on how we can help, I guess, mitigate some of those problems. But if you are on those older platforms, but the idea is just simplify the hardware, make it easy to upgrade, and software is powering the hardware now. So that the hardware is important, but it's not critical. That's not a good way of saying it. You need hardware for it to run, but the power is in the software. Okay, and especially now with Microsoft has Azure, it's got M365, and now it has Windows Server and Azure Stack HCI. They've got the easiest path for your data to seamlessly move back and forth, and from a management perspective. Right now, this is a techie slide, but what is Azure Stack HCI? It's basically Hyper-V software-defined storage, right? So some SSDs typically, and software-defined networking inside of the box, managed by this thing called Windows Admin Center, right? And that's basically the guts of it. Is okay, I've got some storage and I've got my hypervisor. Now, this concept here is either in Azure Stack HCI, which is it's purpose-built HCI platform that Microsoft has released a couple of years ago, but it's also baked into Windows Server 2022. Now, I think a lot of people on the call probably would be interested in the Windows Server version, but I'll go through the two. When it comes to the hardware runs both, and then it's up to, I guess, you and your customer and the workloads which way you'll lean. But if it's normal virtual machine workloads, if you're looking for that hybrid experience, Microsoft is encouraging you to focus on this Azure Stack HCI conversation. So if you go back to my M-Expert thing before, a lot of what we've been doing is helping people understand the differences between the two. Now, Windows Server 2022, you still install Windows. There's still a GUI. You can still put your personalities on it that you're used to, all right? So AD, DHCP, you can see them written there. I can still go and install SQL on top of the box. It's still Windows as we know it. Now, Azure Stack HCI is a little bit different, where it's a cut down version. So it's more like ESXi. So if you've ever installed that on the server, it's basically a small image. It's the fabric that all the workloads run on top. It's not there to have a GUI. It's not there to be Windows as we knew it. But what it does unlock now is it separates the workloads from the fabric. And we can do things like upgrade on the fly. We can, if you think about Windows Server 2022, we had 2019, 2022, whatever the next one's going to be in a couple of years. They're big, bulky upgrades. Whereas with Azure Stack HCI, Microsoft are looking for a yearly or even half-yearly cadence for those upgrades, right? Especially around security and performance. So just this constant idea of keeping like small upgrades, but keeping the platform consistent. And that's if you ever heard of a company called Nutanix, also VMware with vSAN. This is the model that they've been following for quite a number of years, and now Microsoft's doing the same thing. And so, like I said, by separating the workload from the Azure Stack HCI, the hypervisor, it really opens you up to treat it like it is a platform and a fabric. And then as we get to down the track, when I talk about the edge, it's important because it's no longer a server that I give it a name, call it Bob, I have to make sure it's got its backup software on it. I've got 5 VMs in there, and I've got the VMs. I have to patch the VMs. We're getting away from that model, and now it's just an endpoint. And that endpoint is, I'm probably using something like Azure Policy to make sure it's consistent and it's secure consistently. I've got security built in there. I can deploy and patch and manage directly out of Azure, right? That's becoming more common. I'd say we're still probably at the leading edge of that. Microsoft are coming out with a bunch of stuff in the announcements in October around improvements and that, but this is the reason why I'm overemphasizing this, is because it's the direction Microsoft is heading. So if you think of it as M365, you could run Outlook on-prem, or you can run Outlook or Exchange in the cloud. Now it's a no-brainer. You only really run M365 if you can afford it, because all the latest features are there. You don't have to necessarily worry about running that. It's a service that you consume. And so more and more and more, all these Microsoft things that you're using, Power BI, SQL, right? They're going to be just a service as opposed to a thing that I install and I manage. So I'll probably spend a bit longer on that than I should have, but if you've had some experience with Hyper-V, it wasn't the most pleasant thing to manage, to be honest. A lot of it was PowerShell. Some of it was a bit clunky. And with Windows 2019, and now improved obviously in 2022, is this thing called Windows Admin Center. So it's not just for Azure Stack HCI. It replaces all your old MMC consoles that used to do, but there's a lot of functionality being pumped into Windows Admin Center around Azure Stack HCI, Hyper-V, VM management, network management, and it's pretty much all point and click now. So there's nothing in terms of day-to-day functionality that you'll need to go to command line unless there's an issue. So and like I said, because now this is separated out of that stack, we can upgrade that on its own cadence. And if you need to, you actually could run this out of Azure, which I think will be Microsoft's preferred version down the track, maybe in a year or so. But yeah, got the GUI, all the monitoring's built in. Yeah, you can do your templating. You actually could push templates directly out of Azure with this, using Arc and some other tools. So there's a whole lot of Microsoft goodness that's been baked into this, and it definitely, it's still not quite as slick as maybe vCenter if you're used to VMware, but it's improving a lot. Now, a busy slide. If you think about it in terms of, I've got some hardware, right? Of course, it's Lenovo. Thank you for joining. But then I've got this OS layer, right? This fabric layer, which is the cut down version. And then on top of that, I can run my workloads, right? Windows or Linux VMs. And then I can, on top of those, I install my applications, right? Like I said, SQL, Exchange. Where we're seeing the market slowly move to. So like I said, we're having conversations, haven't had a lot of people take it up yet, except for that real leading edge people. But this thing called AKS, and Ash mentioned it before, it's Azure Kubernetes Service. It's Microsoft's way of managing containers. And what's nice about it is AKS is actually in Azure, and what they've done is they've brought it down to the on-premises hardware, right? So in terms of security, patching, management, scaling up, scaling down, all that sort of stuff, you as an admin now, you don't necessarily need to understand Kubernetes that well and to manage it. You just need to know how to deploy it. Now, there is a license cost associated with this, but with the Kubernetes deployments that we have dealt with, right, a lot of them have gone OpenShift with Red Hat, Nutanix and VMware have got their flavors, and they all require, Google's got their one, they've all require someone to be trained up and skilled in managing that, I guess, that Kubernetes ecosystem. And so what Microsoft are trying to achieve here is bringing that onto this platform without necessarily you having to be an expert. And you can see some of these services they're lighting up on top, right? Especially this Arc-enabled data services. What is that? If you've ever been to Azure and you've gone, hey, I want a SQL instance, a managed SQL instance, but I don't want to admin it. I don't want to worry about backing it up. I don't want to worry about managing any of the underlying stuff. I just need a database to send stuff to. That's what this is, right? Managed SQL. And so Microsoft handles the patching, security, all the rest of it. You just consume it. You now can actually go to Azure and push that Arc-enabled data service directly onto the box. It needs this AKS thing for it to run. So you don't even really know that that's doing it, but it's doing it for you. You sort of get my idea. So we've been told by the guy who manages this globally, believe it or not, he lives in Brisbane. Hey, go Brisbane. What they're starting to see now is, even though most of the applications that we're installing today are still just, normal XEs, we normally deploy them the way we would, three-tier applications, more and more and more of the ones getting developed today are all getting developed on containerization, right? So typically inside of the devs got a Linux box and they're managing their containers. They're going to turn around, give it to their IT team and say, hey, it's time for production, or you're going to buy an application and they're going to say, actually, this needs containers to run. And then you're going to go, oh dear, I don't know how to do containers. And then this is where, if we start with this stack here, this is like a future state, but because you're in this model here, you can just turn this on. And that's where Microsoft are heading with all these things is, oh, hey, there's an Azure service. Do you want it on-prem? Okay, turn it on. Now, there's a cost with all of it, but if you can get to a point where you don't have to re-architect, redesign, redeploy new hardware to get access to a service, that's going to be really handy. And this thing here is Azure Arc is what's going to enable it. Now, I won't go into that in detail. We actually did a webinar this morning entirely around this because people are still confused about it, but it's the best way to say it, it's a bridge to Azure. So what it does, it's an agent that runs inside Azure Stack HCI or inside of vSphere or inside a virtual machine. The virtual machine could be in AWS, right? And what it does is it provides a bridge back into Azure for you to run Azure services in that VM. So it's actually, the base version of it is free. So if you're an Azure customer today, you can go in and have a play with it, and it's free. If you turn on things like Azure Monitor, Azure Policy, those sorts of things, they consume Azure resources and it will cost. But if you just do like simple discovery, I want to look at what's the IP addresses, where are they all located, what firmware revisions are they at, then you can actually go and do that and deploy that today. Now, all that Microsoft talk, I'm a hardware man. I put this in, and it's a sort of a difficult slide to talk to, but when it comes to this, it's still very much like Windows, where it's entirely flexible, where I could put Windows on an old server in the corner, I can put it on the brand new server, I can install Windows as a virtual machine, right? It's almost too flexible sometimes, and you can get yourself into a bit of trouble in terms, especially once you start running workloads on top. If it's just a Windows box and I run DHCP and print server and some other stuff, I can just back it up, and if it dies, I just restore it, it's all good. But if it's an environment like Azure Stack HCI, it's not the important part. The important part of my application's on top. So if I don't get the fabric right, if it's flaky, if it's having performance problems, if it crashes, if I can't secure it, then extra problems roll through the environment. So again, I'm overstressing this because I've seen it happen a bit lately. Is with roll your own, people aren't probably taking the time to architect it the completely and secure it. And networking is the biggest thing, to be honest, for all of it. But we can't. ThinkSystem is what we call our servers. Like if you know Lenovo SR30, SR650, a server you can install whatever you want on, and we can sell that. You can put on Windows Server 2019, 2022, no worries. And then you have to go and work it out yourself, how you install Azure Stack HCI from there, right? Then we come into the middle, which is called a certified node, where it's a bit more flexible in terms of if you want to bring your own software, if you want to separate the hardware and the software, then that is a good solution. You can deploy it yourself. But what we've done is gone through and validated the hardware, right? For the hardware and the configuration of the hardware. So this network card is going to work with these NVMe drives, work with that CPU. We're going to get the right performance, blah blah blah, all the hardware stuff. But then you can see there the software can be installed. It doesn't need to be. And then we've got the final one, the appliance. That's what tends to be the most popular at the moment. Once people understand what the product is, where it's got Azure Stack from the factory. We go and deploy it and make sure it's schmick, right? In conjunction with Leader. but then we also support the thing entirely, right? From the hardware through the software through the workloads. And that's where, like I said, we're starting to see an uptick in that, where now people are putting more and more important workloads on this as a platform, right? Microsoft are pushing this hard. A lot of people are talking about it. Lenovo is the only one that gives you these three options, right? So, like I said, appliance is probably the best option for your customer, but there is a cost, right? So if you need to keep the cost down, or if you want to control the install, part of the expert group we're trying to get people skilled up in how to install these things, then the certified node is absolutely fine as well. Now, Edge is really where I'm focusing a lot of my time. It's especially around, if you take a step back, it's it's Dell, HP, Lenovo are the main ones, and then you've got Cisco, and then the remaining sort of hardware vendors. But the servers are the servers, right? And you grew up with a certain type of hardware, and people have favorites. Now, what we've been able to do in Lenovo is create this Think Edge range, where we are actually currently the only tier 1 hardware provider that has this option. So if you're not necessarily a Lenovo user, typically, if your data center is a different vendor, what we're saying is you can actually go and consume these edge devices without affecting your data center's, I guess, not policy, but your structure there. These can be your satellite installs, right? So this SE350 that I'm talking about, I've actually got one just here. I'm not sure if you can see. Hopefully you can see, but there, this is actually a full-blown one socket server, right? We've got 4 DIMM slots. We can put a GPU card in it. We can put about 15 terabytes of NVMe. It does Wi-Fi, 4G, LTE, 25 gig networking if we want to. This is becoming the most popular box that we sell. And in conjunction with that, typically we're deploying Microsoft on top of it, because Microsoft have quite a strong IoT play. And what people want to do is they don't want to have a server at the edge running whatever that they have to manage. They want that to be an Azure endpoint. And that's where we're seeing the uptick for this happen quite a lot. There's the SD450, which is a bigger version of this, about 4 times the size. So it still will fit in a small rack, but we can put multiple GPUs and more storage in that one. And then the 3 little ones, they don't run Windows Server, they don't run Azure Stack HCI, they actually run Windows 10 IoT. But what they do is you can get to a site, let's say it's a manufacturing site, where you may have 50 of these little IoT boxes with whatever manufacturing or getting data from cameras, and then you can potentially have one of these larger ones on site, basically sucking in all that data, doing real-time analytics, and then sending what you need to back up into the cloud. So that's the best example I've got is there's a piggery, a pig farm, and there's lots of pigs, and people struggle sometimes to tell the difference of a pig's face. I know I do. They all like tasty bacon. But anyway, they've trained this AI model to recognize a pig's face, and so we've got a couple of SC350s and a bunch of cameras, and they're tracking the pigs throughout the farm. When are they sleeping? Who are they socializing with? How much are they eating? Going to the toilet, that sort of stuff, and they track all these pigs. And what they're finding is they're getting a 3 times return on the hardware they bought, because the pig, they're identifying when a pig is not well much earlier, right? So they're getting more yield from the farm, but it just leads to a better ecosystem. Now, that's just one example of where it's worked, but I really like that, because as soon as I found out, I actually went to look at some pigs to see if I could see the difference in their face, and I definitely cannot do it. But anyway, but those 2 boxes there, the smaller one that I was holding up and the bigger one, can both be single node. Now, what does that mean? It's Azure Stack HCI only. You can't, if you do Windows Server, you can't do the storage element. You have to manage that yourself. But Microsoft are saying, if you want to do single node with this, make it Azure Stack HCI. You pay a license per call, but then you get that integration with Azure. We get controlled upgrades, right? We get the security patches. Now, when it's a single box, you don't get the resiliency you would get with two nodes. So, I mean, that's pretty obvious, but if we need to, let's say there's a critical patch you need to update, this is for workloads where you can have some downtime, right? Whereas it's very handy to have the box up, but if you need to, it can be down. And where this tends to be, like I said, retail manufacturing is where we're getting the most interest. We've got an opportunity at the moment for 4,000 separate stores. So to give you an idea, right? Just a small, what they used to put a tower server, now they're putting these things have an accelerometer, and they've also got anti-tampering in the lid. They've got secure encrypted drives inside of it. So there's a key manager, and basically, if it feels like it's getting taken off the wall, it will wipe the keys off the device. So it won't wipe the data, but it will wipe access to the data. And so if you've got that in a store, some clothing store, whatever, and someone takes it, yeah, okay, they've got the box, but they can't do anything with it, and they can't do anything with the data. And that's becoming a use case we're asking for more and more and more. If you know Lenovo, it costs more than ST50, right? So the ST50 is still the bargain, not the bargain, it's a bad word. It's the entry level cost. But if you need to be more secure, and like I said, you want to manage it like we're talking about, then this is an excellent option. Now, where a lot of people are doing it, it's this option up top here, where there's two of them together, and we direct connect the ports together. Azure Stack HCI and Microsoft Server HCI is the only HCI where we can direct connect the nodes together. So you can be at a site where maybe there's only 1 gig in the room. We can plug these two together with 25 gig between the nodes. So you've got the performance for the VMs, right? And so as they sync data across the two, but then you can just have 1 gig or even Wi-Fi going out to the market, or it's not market, out to your users. So this is becoming a very common deployment technique. I've got the edge boxes in this picture, but we've done a whole bunch where it's two of our chunky servers with 40 terabytes in each box, and they're just two nodes out the site, runs a school. And what we do is, I haven't got a picture of it here, but it's there's a 2 nodes locally backing up via Veeam just into a cheap storage device, and then our DR and our failover is actually using Azure Backup. So if you go into that WAC Windows admin tool, they call it WAC, you can actually just say back up the environment, and if you can choose the target to be Azure. Now you've got to pay for the space that you're using in Azure, but if you haven't got the luxury of having a second site to have DR, that can be a really attractive way of getting, I guess, affordable DR, because you can spin the machines up if you want to. If not, at least you've got a copy of the data off premises, right? So that's, you can see there's a few here. The reason why we keep pushing these boxes is that I can just see this is going to be the big grower for us here in the market. Same pictures, different slide. Yeah, dust, shock and vibe. We're putting some of these in planes now, right? We've got wireless options, and we're coming out with a bunch in about 60 days. I can't talk about, but there will be a more affordable version of this. So stay tuned for that. Now, just to tie it all together, right? We talked about Windows Server. This is just an idea of what Azure Stack HCI can do and where it fits, right? But you can see here, this end of support is quite critical. 2008, 2002 is already done, and then you've got SQL Server 2012 already finished. But then next year, right, we've got 2008 R2 extended security updates, and then this one here is the big one where I think it's going to catch a lot of people out, which is 2012 R2, which is what Ash went through in detail. What Microsoft have done, and this is sort of more of a carrot than anything else, if you were to take that workload or that virtual machine running 2012 and put it into Azure, then Microsoft will give you free extended security updates. So that's not support, but you're getting patches, right? And if it's not running in Azure, then you actually have to pay Microsoft to support that box, right? Not support it, but to get the access to the security. So there's companies that actually pay Microsoft to get access to the latest patches, because even though they can't migrate off Windows 2008, they need to make sure the systems are patched, right? Because like I actually alluded to, right, this Optus thing that happened, it's a real thing. So what Microsoft have done is on Azure and now Azure Stack HCI. So potentially, as you can see here, it's 1 year. So in other words, if it's going to run out in October in 2023, this will give you extended support till October 2024. Sorry, my maths is bad. But you get the idea. Microsoft have sort of made it so that, okay, if you stay in our ecosystem, we'll give you free security updates. If you haven't got time to upgrade now, then you can put it off for a bit and then see what you can do, and maybe you can, once you're in this ecosystem, you can look to grow it. Now, the reason why I'm really emphasizing this is you could potentially, depending on the workload, it may not be critical, but you haven't got time to upgrade it. That's where that single node, two node thing comes in, where you've got your normal stack running VMware, right? You've got your EMC storage there, it's doing, well, Dell EMC storage, doing its thing, but then you've got 6 VMs you don't know what to do with. Potentially, you could look at a solution like this, bring those VMs across, make sure you get those security updates. So you're not necessarily competing against the production environment. This is just plugging a security hole that you know you're going to have. So, and then from there, if you get used to it and you like it, you never know what's going to happen, right? You might like it going forward. So they're your options, right? Move to Azure, or move to Azure Stack HCI, or what Ash went through, go through and upgrade the workloads. And that's that upgrade the workloads, something Leader can help with, something that Lenovo can help with. We've got you know, plenty of services and capability inside the business to do that. So in terms of what's next, a lot of what I talked about today, you can see here, Sizer, the latest features, there's presentations, there's documentation, there's videos, Lenovo Salesportal.com. This is actually a website run by Lenovo and Microsoft around this stack, because like I said, it's all about awareness and education, because it's all fairly new. You might want to write that word down, just Google for it. Hybrid cloud deal size estimator. A lot of, like I've been alluding to it during the presentation, a lot of things will have a cost associated with it. Some don't, but some do. This tool here allows you to plug in some details, right? There's Azure Stack, $10 per core per month. But okay, I want to put in Azure Monitor, and I want to put in AKS. What's that going to cost me? Is this realistic, or is this guy full of crap? And I'm not going to change from what I'm doing. This is a good tool just to get an idea of how much it's going to cost. In terms of partners and sizing, if you're unsure about sizing, come and ask Leader for help. They can reach out to me and that team at the beginning. We can take you through it. The good news is I used the wrong screenshot, so that's the same screenshot as before. But this is actually an online available sizer you can use to size this up and get a feel for what the workload. So just Azure Stack HCI sizer is what you search for. If not, ask Simon. I'll send you the link. And then here we go, last slide. But Ignite is Microsoft's big shindig. It's October 12th in this region's time zone. It's a 3-day thing. It's pretty long. What I've found is a lot after every day or after the event, there are people that do summary sessions, summary like YouTube videos, bits and pieces. I would just say, if you haven't got 3 days to dedicate to it, just have a look for any information about either Azure Stack HCI or Azure Arc. Just those two things. There's going to be, everything's going to have hybrid in it. Arc in particular, there's going to be a bunch of announcements around Arc and Azure Stack HCI that are really going to benefit the partner community. I'm not allowed to talk about it. If you're interested in Lenovo in general, right, especially on device side, AR, VR, all the new gaming stuff, Lenovo Tech World's October 18, so just Tech World 22, Lenovo.com. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff there. And then finally, I've left this up, like I said, screenshot there if you're interested. Most of the time it's just me yakking on, but we're really trying to make sure everyone's educated, aware, and knows the options that are out there about this. So that's it from me. I'm not sure, Simon, how are you going with the noise, mate? Did you want to say any words before you finished?
All good, all good. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yep.
Yeah, mate. No,
Yes, I
fantastic.
just want to say thank you very much for your time, Ash, Dan. Awesome information, great presentation there, and lots to take away. And thank you everyone for joining and taking time out of your day to stay up to date with all the latest and greatest that Microsoft and Lenovo have to offer. And just to close off, I want to say that, look, if you have any kind of questions or you need any more information, please reach out to your account managers. They'll come to myself, and then we'll work with Dan and Ash to answer any of your questions that you might have. Yeah, look, that is all from me. Dan, Ash, anything you'd like to add at the end?
No, perfect, mate. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
No, that's all for me. Thank you.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
thanks, everyone.
Well, thanks. Thank you very much. Just bye-bye.